Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Sunday, January 29th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Indiana game is in 216 days. The game against Michigan in 300 days exactly. And it just now struck me, I should have figured out how many days it was till the Penn State game. It's, I think, 5 weeks or so before that Michigan game. But we are talking Penn State today because on the show a couple days ago, we started talking Penn State. And it was like I started talking myself into Penn State being potentially very, very good this year. Very good this year. And I want to do a little bit of a sanity check. So when we want to do a little sanity check on Penn State, we talked to our good buddy, Donnie Collins of the Scranton Times-Tribune. He's been covering Penn State since 2004, if I remember correctly. Donnie, thank you for being here. I wanted to start with just kind of like a little bit of a take the temperature of the Penn State fan base, because I think Ohio State fans are well-versed in, you know, the 11-win season where it's like, yeah, but it wasn't exactly the 11 games we wanted to win. Penn State goes 11-2, wins the Rose Bowl, beats Utah, great game, Rose Bowl championship season, but they lost to Ohio State, they lost to Michigan. Like, what is the mood around the Penn State fan base right now?
It's interesting. It's maybe the most interesting time that I've covered Penn State because they have legitimate championship hopes, not the fake championship hopes that you have just going into every year where you think, oh, we're a big time program. This is the year we got to win the champ. They really could do it. They could win the Big Ten this year, and they have the pieces. A lot of things have to go well, but it's one of those interesting spots for the Penn State fan where they're finally in this spot where they can look at it and say, hey, we're in the mix. We are one of those teams that could probably deserve to be in the conversation for Big Ten champion, but you're also ignoring a lot of potential pitfalls around the way. So this is not a perfect team, but it's a really good team, and we saw it at the Rose Bowl. They beat Utah up in the Rose Bowl, and I think coming in, there was some recency bias. Utah had played a really wonderful game against USC in the Pac-12 championship, and they were a tough team. They played great defense, and everybody thought that's a team that's going to give Penn State problems. And Penn State, talent-wise, just blitzkrieged them. So you're looking at really right now a team that has a lot of star power, a lot of potential going forward, especially at the quarterback position. They could be better there than they've been. But at the same time, you're going to have to prove that you can win with some younger players and some talent. And I think Penn State fans are really hoping they can do it. But to me, it's more 2024 is the year they better get it done. 2023 is the year they can.
Okay, well, let's start at that quarterback position then. And Drew Allar, an Ohio native who got it, one of the ones who got away, and I think Ohio State would have liked to have him in their 2021 class. They ended up with Devin Brown as well, instead, which they think they're very happy with him as well. But, this is a team where they've had Sean Clifford at quarterback for a million years. And it has always felt like there was a little bit of a ceiling with Sean Clifford at quarterback. He was very good, but he just always reminded me of JT Barrett, where it was Ohio State was very good, but you didn't really see them being able to beat Alabama, beat the top of the sport kind of teams when he was there. And then that changed when you brought in Dwayne Haskins, you brought in Justin Fields, you brought in CJ Stroud after that. If Sean Clifford is the JT Barrett of Penn State football, can Drew Allar be that Dwayne Haskins or Justin Fields or CJ Stroud if things break right this year?
Yes, he can. And will he be is a different question, but he can. He's got every tool in the book in the toolbox. I mean, people make these ridiculous comparisons to college quarterbacks who've never played before and these NFL stars. And one I heard all last summer was this guy is just like Ben Roethlisberger. And then you watch him play, and I've seen a lot of Ben Roethlisberger play. I'm a big Steelers fan. You watch Allar play, even in little spurts, he looks like Ben Roethlisberger. He is a massive guy in the pocket. He runs okay, but he breaks so many tackles. He can give you that second dimension, and his arm is elite. It is as good. He has as good an arm as I've seen from any quarterback at Penn State since Kerry Collins. He could really zip it. He's got some ability for a kid. He's developmentally, he's not even a project. This guy should be a sure thing. I mean, they've had some quasi near 5-star quarterbacks come in over the years. Anthony Morelli never got over the top. They've had a couple of this guy is not Trace McSorley, a guy who's going to have to gut it out. This guy has so much talent that it's going to be scary. I mean, Penn State fans are really salivating over this guy playing. Now, that said, Sean Clifford played nearly a perfect game in the Rose Bowl. And I think that kind of woke some people up to say, hey, that's why they were playing this guy ahead of Allar. Allar has not played perfect, even in relief outings. He's shown some cracks at times that he needs to learn from. So I think the idea of him getting a full spring as the number one guy, getting into the summer, a full summer camp as the number one guy, you could easily project him being a guy who can carry you on offense. And he's not going to have to carry them. They have such a good rushing attack, but he's a guy who can win you games. But we don't know that yet. We have no idea what he's really going to be about. Christian Hackenberg was one of those guys too. And he had a great first year, not so great second year, and it kind of fell apart on him. I think Allar is a better all-around, more polished prospect than a guy like Hackenberg was. But he's just got to go out and prove it. Now, does he have a better chance to prove it than other guys have? Yes. But I think if Sean Clifford was coming back for year 7, or if it was year 6 next year, I think we could almost talk more literally about this being a year where Penn State should win the Big Ten. But you are going in there with a first year starting quarterback, and this is a program that has not outside of Hackenberg ever had a first year quarterback go in and dominate for them. So I'm thinking that. And Penn State's in a really good place here because their big question mark on offense is their 5-star quarterback. He just has to prove it.
Yeah, and the rest of that offense is, the skill talent seems like it should be pretty darn good this year. They've got, you mentioned the talented running back duo they've got back. They also landed a very big transfer from Kent State, Dante Cephas. He had in 2021, that was his best year with Kent State, 82 catches, 1,240 yards, 9 touchdowns. That feels like something that was just kind of one of those, the missing piece. You don't want to be the team that goes into the portal and brings in 18 people and expects them all to start. But, Ohio State has done that in the past with, hey, they need a guard. Okay, you bring in Jonah Jackson. Hey, you need a running back. You bring in Trey Sermon. It's like the one guy, the one spot you need someone. Tanner McAllister playing safety last year for Ohio State. Cephas feels like he might be the one guy to sort of slide into a spot where Penn State maybe needed one more wide receiver for that offense, and he may kind of fit that bill.
Yeah, I think we all went into the offseason thinking, or I actually went into the Rose Bowl thinking, Penn State really needs to bolster that receiving core because they did lose Parker Washington pretty unexpectedly, I thought, to the NFL draft, and Mitch Tinsley is off to he's graduating. So they did need to replace their top 2 guys, and Keandre Lambert-Smith, as talented as he is, has not been consistent. So you're kind of monitoring this transfer portal as receivers go in the whole way, and the Oregon kid Thornton that ended up going to Tennessee, that was a name that was associated with Penn State. There was Caden Prather's another guy ended up I think back at Maryland, but you're looking at all these names, but the one from the start that you look at and circle and say that's the guy they really have to get if they want to call this successful, and getting that kind of guy who would fit, number one, their system, and number two, what they really need on offense next year was Dante Cephas. And Penn State did a really good job getting that guy after some consternation for weeks where you see all these other receivers going other places. But Cephas ends up in the fold, and he really gives you that guy who could play the slot, he could play outside, but he could beat you deep. He's got a lot of speed, a lot of shiftiness. He's more like Jahan Dotson. Not that he's that kind of a player, but he's more like Jahan Dotson than Mitchell Tinsley was. And I think that was maybe one element of the offense last year that was missing, is that guy who can consistently beat you deep or take the short throw and bring it to the house. So I think getting Cephas obviously is a big deal. Malik McClain, another receiver they got out of Florida State. He's a 6'4" guy. He's going to be a red zone target for them, I think. But those two guys, kind of contrasting pieces. And I think Penn State and Ohio State, one thing they do very similarly is, as you said, go into the portal for needs and not necessarily wants. And I think one thing Ohio State and Michigan both did that Penn State didn't do this offseason was get that experienced quarterback out of the portal. But Penn State certainly, if you're going to say, hey, they need to fill this one spot, and if that's the only thing they do, and you can call it successful, they better do it. That was definitely receiver, and definitely I think they got their number one guy in Cephas, but he's going to be a major factor this year, I think. And if he's not a major factor, they're in some trouble because they really need that one guy, that experienced receiver, to go in and play a consistent role in the offense. Tinsley did it this season, but he wasn't a game-breaking type of receiver. I think Cephas can be.
And, the quarterback has been one of the limiting factors on the offense over the years that, maybe kind of capped him out a little bit. But it has always felt like the real restrictor plate on that offense has been the offensive line. And it has just consistently been an issue more or less every season to some degree or another, essentially since those sanctions 10 plus years ago. And then you look at the numbers last year, and it wasn't perfect. It wasn't incredible, but it was better. You look at all the advanced stats, line yards, they went from 116th in the country to 60th. So terrible to average. Power success rate, 122nd to 87th. So terrible to not that bad. Stuff rate, 116th to 44th. So terrible to pretty good. Sack rate, 75th to 38th. It was like everything was just better enough on the offensive line that it was like, oh, this is like tangible progress for, what feels like the first time in forever. Is that an area where you're expecting them to continue getting better, or at least be able to stay at the kind of okay level they were at last year?
I think they're going to get better up front. That to me is the one area, and you hit on it. They made the most improvement last year, and they should continue to do that. I mean, a year ago at this time, if you told me, who was a coach that's likely to get fired for his job performance, I would have told you the offensive line coach, Phil Trautwein. But he's done a really good job kind of turning it around, and he's turned it around by developing younger guys and, again, hitting needs out of the portal. A couple of years ago, they tried to fill that need with Eric Wilson out of the Ivy League. He played a lot of guard. It ended up being out of necessity because he was brought in to be a backup, but some injuries forced him to play. And he was solid, but just kind of okay. The last year they go back to the Ivy League, get a Cornell guy, Hunter Norzad, and he ended up playing very, very well. So I think it really started with him. They got Sal Wormley, the right guard. He had missed the entire 2021 season with an injury. Comes back, and he was okay for most of this season. But Penn State was able, because they got Norzad to play guard, was able to move Juice Scruggs from guard to the center, where he really excelled. So they got they were so improved at center last year. I mean, it's inarguable that was the position that was so much better than it was the year before. And then the second position they really did well at last year and got a lot of solid play out of was left tackle. And I mean, Olu Fashanu might end up being the number one pick in the draft in 2024. He's that dominant a tackle. And it was kind of surprising. We had heard rumors all year that, hey, this guy's actually going to come back, even though they're projecting him as a first round offensive lineman in the 2023 draft. But we had heard he was coming back, and it was still surprising. He played so well. It was still surprising when he actually announced that he was coming back. And I think what stands out to me about Penn State's offensive line is, even if Fashanu didn't come back, they were still going to be okay at left tackle, because he left the Ohio State game with an injury, didn't play again the rest of the year, and Derek Shelton goes in. Drew Shelton goes in. Derek Shelton's the Pirates manager. Drew Shelton goes in and as a true freshman and plays remarkably well at left tackle. So they have three tackles, with Caden Wallace coming back, who've played a lot of football, who have a lot of ability, and they're going to mix and match those two guys. I think they're going to move Norzad to center, and they're going to still be pretty good at guard with Wormley coming back, and Landon Tengwall, who missed half the season this year with an injury. He was a 5-star kid coming out of high school. He's going to play at left guard. So they have some guys coming in the recruiting class. Alex Birchmeyer looks really, really good as a true freshman, and they're not afraid to play the true freshman anymore. So Birchmeyer might come in, and he might be a swing man for them next year. Javen Williams he was one of the top 20, 25 recruits in the country last year. He's another 5-star kid at guard. He's got some work to do, I think, but he's going to come in and maybe compete for playing time. So this offensive line, which protected Cliff really well this year, and Cliff didn't run as much as he had in the past. He was more comfortable in the pocket this year. And I think that helped him because you watch and you talk about that ceiling he had, and he did, but a lot of it was because he got banged up so early into so many seasons because that line was so bad. So I think next year they have a real chance to be one of the better lines in the country. And it's going to be interesting because they're going to have a tackle on the bench who's NFL caliber. Now, whichever one that is, I don't think they're going to move Caden Wallace inside to guard or move Drew Shelton to guard. But if they do, this could be one of the deeper offensive lines they've had since the mid-'90s when they had a lot of NFL guys up front on some really great offenses. So I think, we could talk all day about Allar and the running backs and the receivers, but those offensive linemen are really what made this season work.
Well, thank you to Donnie for that half of the conversation. And yes, that is half of the conversation. He and I ended up talking for something like 37 minutes. We're going to split this. There's a lot to talk about with Penn State and a lot to talk about in part 2. You're going to hear about the defense. You're also going to hear about NIL in Penn State and how that's all going for them, because that's obviously a very hot topic with Ohio State, Penn State, colleges all across the country. We'll talk about that. That will be on tomorrow morning's episode. So we will talk to you then.